welcome to our conversation on leveraging cloud computing for innovation and inclusion. Our fireside panel today is João Gaspar, President of FinTech MZ, board member at the Alliance Digital Finance Associations, and founder of Paytech. Kagiso Gichabi, Chair of FinTech Association of South Africa, and co-founder of Afra Nova Digital. And Rob Madziva, advisor to the Association of Digital Finance Practitioners Zambia, board member at the Alliance Digital Finance Associations, and founder of Digital Mobile Africa. And finally, myself, I'm Sarah Corley, CEO of the Alliance of Digital Finance Associations. We're delighted to be having this chat with you today. But before we launch directly all into the conversation, maybe we can clarify exactly what we mean by cloud computing. So the European Banking Authority defines cloud computing as a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I kind of get that definition, but I think we could dig a little more into it and make it a bit more transparent and user-friendly. Maybe, João, you can help us with that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Yes, we can take some 2 or 3 examples of services that are available or made available by cloud computing. And one of them that most of the fintechs and also some banks are using is electronic UIC. So nowadays, when we have an app and we want to make an onboarding to a digital account or wherever, there is a process of user validation, and most of the solutions are made through a cloud computing system that is not provided by the service provider that we are applying for. So those services are made based on cloud computing. Also, when we are talking about credit scoring, the solutions for credit scoring are based on big data analysis, and those data are processed and let's say scrambled and tested by cloud computing systems. Another one that is not recent, because there is a lot of years that is going on, but right nowadays people are talking more about that is the artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is being used for financial education, for help desk or for supporting the customers of financial society, of new services, and also those analyses and machine learning processors are made by cloud computing. Those are just 3 simple examples that we can use nowadays with cloud computing. But for sure, there are others, and my colleagues will complement also that.
The 2022 global cloud computing market was valued at $483 billion, and with a predicted annual growth rate of about 14% between 2023 and 2030 in the banking and financial services and insurance sector, which accounts for almost 24% or a quarter of 2022 revenues. Around 55% of the market share is taken from the big 4. Okay, this is the Amazons, Google, Azure, and Microsoft, and Alibaba. So there are other players, and as we'll get to see, it's important now that the big 4 have made it a good market to play in for the smaller sectors to now actually help the SMEs. Cloud computing brings many advantages to banks, I believe, especially so to fintechs, to reduce the costs, faster processing speeds, greater flexibility in terms of scaling up, and greater security, of course. We don't have to worry. Myself, I used to work in an environment where I would go to the server room to see if things are broken or working. And basically, those are some of the things that have been taken away from us. We can concentrate on what we need to do and our business. And now everything is almost seamless. You can connect your AI engine, you can connect other platforms quite easily and seamlessly using cloud technology. I think from the users themselves, you start seeing that if you go perhaps on an internet application, it's faster to get to all these things because of cloud computing, because it's all optimized and built around efficiency. The other thing is cost effectiveness, of course. We don't have to duplicate effort. You don't have to buy servers that someone else has already got for our startup. But of course, there are some advantages and disadvantages which we'll talk about in the next sessions. Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, can I just jump in? Actually, Rob made quite interesting, comments there, especially when it comes to affordability, the cost effectiveness of cloud computing, and greater flexibility, right? Because it makes a difference. That's where the difference is. And for me, I think that the financial services sector, the banking, can benefit greatly by the use of cloud computing. I'm just going to add on to just a few items that Rob touched on. For example, reducing cost. I strongly believe that banks can reduce their capital expenditure by eliminating the need to invest in and maintain extensive on-prem infrastructure, which is very important, right? Because we know that currently, majority previously used to be on-prem, and now we're moving towards cloud. And then another model that is quite interesting would be the hybrid effect, where you can have on-prem and on-prem and on cloud. But in addition to that, they can pay for the cloud services on call it a pay-as-you-go basis. For instance, a bank can use their cloud-based servers for hosting their customer portal instead of setting up and maintaining physical servers. And when you talk about faster processing, and we know as an example, right, and why banks and financial services can benefit from cloud computing, from faster processing speeds point of view. When you're looking at high-frequency trading platforms that are used in banks, they can leverage the processing power that is executed by cloud computing, with minimal latency, especially. And this allowed them, obviously, to take advantage of the market fluctuation and faster, and making it faster and more informed decision quickly, instead of waiting for other things. But I think it's important to also understand the compliance part of it that cloud computing brings to financial services or the banks in general. They can adhere to regulatory requirements such as, these days everyone is thinking about PCI, DSS compliance, or HIPAA, depending where you come from in the world, or even GDPR, right? What I've seen, cloud providers will offer compliance certifications and tools to help the banks ensure that they're meeting these standards, which is very important. Instead of by themselves going out there trying to regulate them or trying to get the requirements sorted, they can use, for example, Microsoft Azure. They provide some tools and resources to help organizations, the banks, to comply with GDPR. And especially when talking about handling customer data. So using cloud computing, they can quickly get into that, and it's a big advantage. And Joel mentioned something quite critical, which is KYC, especially for the banks. So from KYC and biometric authentication, what I see, and also even from our side, because I also run a fintech platform, we we use cloud-based technology to integrate to KYC verification services, which is important. Instead of having our tech team going out there building these capabilities, we can easily integrate to them through cloud computing. And even like biometric authentication solutions, even facial recognition. When we onboard our clients through AWS, we're using AWS system for facial recognition, and which plays a major role and helps the banks, fintechs, or anyone in the financial services space. Yeah. And well, I'm not going to talk about AI and ML because that one is almost it's everyone when you wake up like AI, ML.
We've only got a short time for this session too, right? So let's not open another long can of worms.
Absolutely. So from ML point of view, the services can analyze vast amount of financial data. And something that is important is to identify fraudulent transactions or even assess credit risks and provide personal investment advice, depending the type of sector that we are operating in, right? Yeah, so we see that, for example, AWS has a tool called SageMaker, yeah? And they use it to build and deploy ML model for credit scoring, and also helping with more accurate lending decisions. So the benefits are endless. I'm not even gonna, there are so many. I'm just gonna stop here and let the conversation flow a little bit.
So, I mean, I think that's wonderful. We've got some great benefits coming out there. Zhao, I'd love to hear, what some benefits from you, and also to think about, are there particular parts of the sector who, I mean, we talked a lot about maybe sort of banks and, and bigger financial services providers, but there obviously is benefits to the small startups just beginning as well. So I don't know, Zhao, maybe you've got some thoughts on that.
Well, Gigishu has just explained several benefits, and I think that most of them are well understood. But let me just give another perspective. In our understanding, there is no way of fintech to make their process of internationalization without using the cloud computing system. So now, in nowadays, it's impossible to think that when one company that starts in one country wants to go to 2 or 3 other countries, have to install a new service, a new data service, a new data center in each country. That is not practical, and for that, cloud computing must be used and should be used. So legislation and compliance in terms of each country must be revised to accommodate this new enterprise and this new way of making business in terms of financial services. Because, I believe that the prohibition of using cloud computing in some countries are only prohibited for financial service, because you can use it for other type of business. But it's important for financial service, that's our market, to have more openness in terms of government, in terms of policymakers, in terms of central banks in each country, to allow the users of cloud computing for expansion and for internationalization of the companies. All of those benefits that Gigishu has already said are also important and must be provided by cloud services. But this point that I want to raise is the ability for internationalization. It's not possible if you cannot use cloud computing services.
And Zhao, when we did looking at the results of the survey we did of all Alliance members in Africa, we found that 20% of the members were not allowed to use cloud computing for citizens' data in the financial services space. And that's a significant number, but also some of the other regulatory policies and approaches are a challenge too: data protection, cybersecurity, consumer protection. Zhao, maybe you can just, as you've started the conversation around regulation, I'd love to hear some more thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Not only must talk about compliance in terms of usage of cloud computing, but also other type of policies that must be put in place by by each country, by the regulators. Things like user protection, data protection, cybersecurity aspects that must be put in place. But let me say something. There is several articles and surveys that have been made, and there is no better solution for security than those provided by cloud computing service providers, because they have all of them have tier 4 levels of data centers, and in most of the countries, the private companies cannot afford to have a tier 4 data center. So and they are more secure in terms of cloud computing service providers, and they have lots of new solutions based on artificial intelligence and machine learning to detect and to protect and to react to cyber attacks. So that's an important issue. There must be legislation in each country, but once more, the security aspects are better resolved by cloud computing service providers than by a private data center. This is one of the aspects. Sorry.
And I'm looking at another aspect of the survey that we did, and that was around skills and knowledge. And we found that 60% of the surveyed members can access some form of training for cloud computing, but actually half of them at least reported quite a significant problem with lack of access and affordability to qualified professionals within their country. And then we also started to look at what that would look like at the regulator. In order to have the right regulatory environment to allow cloud computing to thrive, you also need that level of skill and knowledge and confidence in the regulator about how to use cloud computing. And that was something that our members also seemed to think, along with sort of the training and the skill knowledge within the profession itself, also within the regulators, was also a limiting factor. And I guess that's impacting, if we don't understand how to well implement cloud computing, what its benefits are, and sort of really make sure that we then get all the benefits that you all talked about, like increased security, like ability to scale, and that kind of flexibility, it's really going to trip us up. According to Deloitte, cloud computing is one of the most sought after skills in the world, and there's a talent crunch. So obviously this is a gap, right, that we actually need to plug, need to fill, need to be aware of, that everybody within the financial service, whether it's the providers, whether it's the regulator, that we need to have sort of improved skills and knowledge, be able to use and leverage all of these. And so I think we've got some challenges. We've got some challenges about regulation. We've got challenges around skills and knowledge. And I think we've also got some challenges around industry, perception. I mean, Rob, how do you and sort of also others that, kind of, perceive, is that sometimes there's some perceptions of cloud computing that it's significantly more expensive or more difficult to use?
Yeah. The perception mostly is around risk and the sensitivity of the data that people carry, or the companies carry. And this is equally the same for the regulators, the consumers themselves, and the businesses that are actually seeing the best of both worlds, where, for example, some banks are allowed to have data on cloud, and some banks are not allowed. This I'm talking on behalf of African banks as well that I've talked to. And with that comes the risk of a security breach can actually bring down a bank, especially for fintechs that are starting up. That is a death knell for such organizations. So really, we see the fact that cloud computing has kind of hedged around and protected the systems well enough, because they are taking care of a lot of data, a lot of people's sensitive data, it has become more secure in that way. Gone are the days where you would see, okay, if you are on now from a consumer perspective, if you are on an Apple computer versus a Microsoft computer, you'll be attacked, etc., etc. If you look at it from a server perspective, everything is protected from cloud computing, but also the machines that the users are using are also protected. So there is a biggest fear that the security of self-managed computers is worse now, and it's better to go into cloud computing. And I think that those were the main things that came out from the research as well.
Thanks, Rob. And one of the other things that really stood out to me from the research that we did was, one of the biggest challenges identified. 90% of the respondents to the survey felt that network coverage posed an enormous challenge to the adoption of cloud computing, particularly in sort of more peri-urban and rural areas. And that is also where the majority of the population lives. So, how feasible is it that, where we are, that cloud computing, can really work and actually, sort of across the whole of the continent?
Yeah.
Sorry, can I take this?
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry,
You're jumping.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Jump in.
No, okay. Sorry, Rob. Actually, this one is something that is very close to my heart. Obviously, in the continent, for us, obviously, two major things, right? If you're talking about financial inclusion, firstly is, can you access it? Can you access the financial services? And how do you access these services, right? Services and products. So when you're looking at the key, call them infrastructure, digital infrastructures that are required to access these services, that's electricity and connectivity. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm on the right track, and because I got excited when I heard that, Sarah. So yeah, for me, obviously the governments that need to play a major role. There's from accessing electricity point of view, there needs to be an expansion of electricity access, whether it's a rural electrification or even microgrid developments, right? Throughout in our remote areas, in our townships, talking about South Africa, in our townships and rural areas as well. So rural electrification is very important. And I think also public and private partnership plays a critical role. Governments and organizations can invest in rural electrification projects to bring electricity to the remote and underserved areas of our continent. And then, talking about renewable energy, like solar, that is important. That is key. It's a quick way to get electrification in the rural areas and our townships, right? So electricity is important. And then talking about connectivity, from connectivity point of view, broadband expansion is something that I don't think government and the private sector is playing intentional role in, right? Telcos and governments can work together to expand the high-speed broadband internet access throughout the rural and the remote areas of the continent. So, fiber optic cables and deploying the wireless network is critical to that as well. I know people saying that 3G is outdated, but in the continent, 3G still plays a major role, and we should not ignore the impact of it, especially in the rural and the underserved areas. I know we are now on 5G, and already we are 5 to 6G as well. So yeah, that's something that I think I just wanted to highlight. But internet service providers can also play a major role in this initiative as well. Yeah, so Rob, I'm going to go on mute for a second.
Sure. No, that's okay. Yeah, definitely. And actually, I just want to point out what's happening in Tanzania, and we have a department which is a government department called Universal Communication Service Access Fund, right? So what they do basically is to build services in the rural areas, and what they have managed to do is to convince all the players, the stakeholders, especially MNOs, to say, come together, put some money into this fund, and then we create a bid process where you can bid to lay out cables or to do base stations or things like that in the rural areas, which means actually they are pushing services to the rural areas where the normal MNO would say, this doesn't make any business sense. There's no business case for this. So now they build using money that is collaboratively put into a pocket, and then it's subsidized by the government. They pay a very little money out of it, and then when they do the tender, it's the MNOs themselves that are actually involved in tendering process, and one or two can win, or all of them can win, depending on the areas of coverage and the required, which is actually bring the services to the last mile, which is I think this is where it's going. And people who are now trying, like ourselves, who do last mile delivery, digital platforms at the last mile, we can now reliably have communication, as well as be able now to use cloud computing in a very remote area. So yeah, this is one point I wanted to make.
Sorry, let me add a third challenge, because my colleagues talked about the electricity and the connectivity, but also there is importance about the costs for services, for usage, in terms of end user. And the cost has a twofold side, because when we talk about USSD, the costs are supported by the service provider. But at least in my country, in Mozambique, there is none of the fintechs are using USSD because the cost is very high to support by them. So the new fintechs that are coming to the market are bidding or are trying to push for apps based on 3G data, 4G data. But that opens a new problem, because the end user are not used to pay for accessing to financial service, because they are using USSD from the main MMOs, okay? And MMOs belong to the MNOs, so the costs are inside are somehow provided inside the company. So there are not reflection for the end user. So that is important. That is very important for the regulators, for telecommunication regulators, to put in place special tariffs for financial service access based on cloud computing, on data centers, remote access. And that was one of the key factors that push for financial inclusion, for instance, in India. In India, they put in place a flat rate for USSD transactions, for instance. The costs are not based on time, but are based on the transaction provided to the end user. So there's something also to discuss and to put in place in African countries about the costs for accessing the connectivity, for accessing the financial services.
Yeah. Sorry, Sarah, actually, I know that we might be running out of time here, but John touched on a very important part. Actually, I'm just going to try and contain it and summarize it, right? For me, there's something that is critical. It's about enabling the enablers, right? Talking about financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is not only about the end users, but also those that enable the end users, yeah? Yeah. So and that's something that I advocate greatly in as part of my role as the chairman of FinTech Association of South Africa. Even we have set up an initiative called Kasi Tech, which focus on fintechs in our townships. And what we're saying, we need to be intentional, government and the private sector, we need to be intentional about enabling the enablers, right? And that talks to the regulatory requirements that John touched on now. And also even the cost of that. You know, when you're a fintech and a startup, trying to run a USSD is very expensive. Joao, I know this, I can attest to it. I can attest to it. But then in summary, I think that cloud computing
if you go to the service provided by data, an app, it's not used by the end user because it's very cost for the end user. You know, for instance, in Mozambique, and I know in other countries, the cost to access to the YouTube or WhatsApp or Facebook are very, very low, very much lower than the cost for accessing the data that must be provided by a computer inside the country. So that's there is a nonsense about the cost for data communication.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, my last word on this one, I think that cloud computing can significantly lower the barrier of entry for financial service providers, especially the fintechs and startups, right? And also, obviously, it will promote innovation and enhance the affordability and accessibility of the services and products that are available or that are made available for the unbanked and underbanked individuals and businesses. Businesses, we're talking about these, you know, the guys selling fruits and vegetables on the street. How do we enable them to be able to sell them? So through cloud computing, if we make cloud computing cheaper for the banks and the financial service providers, they will pass on that gain, that cost saving to the end user. So that is something that is important to highlight, that how can cloud computing reduce the cost of financial services and products? So the cheaper it is, the better for the end users.
Thank you, Kiki. So I think that's a really important point to sort of begin to end our conversation. You know, why do we even bother to look at this as a topic in the first place? And actually, it's because of that financial inclusion angle. And, you know, we know that there are some key challenges and blockages. Part of what we're doing with the Alliance of Digital Finance Associations working group is discussing what these are and trying to put together some recommendations in place, touching on things like digital transformation policies that governments need to have in place to support that infrastructure. And Rob, you gave a great example of, you know, a good example of how that's being done in Tanzania. We also talked about some regulatory challenges that sort of don't allow either the use or don't really encourage the use of cloud computing. There's some industry perspectives that maybe need changing about, you know, sort of how to use cloud computing well and efficiently, and also some skills and knowledge barriers that also prevents and affordability as well. There's much we need to do. I'm really excited to continue to delve into this topic in our working group, and hopefully next year at the event we can share our full recommendeds and bring you the industry along with us to advocate for change. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking with you, and look forward to continuing our work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Really
everyone.
appreciate it.